How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Relentless Growth Podcast. I'm Jack Maher, here with my great friend Chase Calhoun, who's getting ready. He's tapering. He's got an Ironman coming up. So we're excited for him on that. And we've got a great episode for you guys today, focusing on some smaller tertiary markets and kind of what we're looking for in our businesses. But before that, we're going to start out this episode like we do each one with a win and an update. So, Chase, what's new in your world? What's an update for us?
Well, man, I think for a win for me, it's just going to be this race is I'm less than a week out from this full Ironman, and so I'm tapering down this week and trying to get a little bit of extra rest and eat a little bit extra food. But it's Sunday's the day, so it's coming up here quick, which is exciting. So looking forward to that. And then just an update, business wise, it's just we're pushing, we're making good progress, moving towards rezoning and entitlements for the build and rent project we have coming up in a new market. So that's something we're probably going to dive into a little bit today. And then also making good progress with the city, hopefully, regarding this build to rent development we're going to do that's going to utilize single family homes with attached ADUs, which is a new thing for us. And so it'll be exciting once we get the final approval, hopefully this week, so we can start going vertical on those as soon as next week.
That's great. It sounds like that terminology is real important.
It's very, I posted something on the internet the other day and I was like, hashtag not duplexes. It's a single family home with an ADU. So, but it does resemble loosely a duplex, just a little bit different.
No, that's awesome.
So, how about what's new with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So biggest thing for us, obviously, we do new construction, single family and multifamily. In Spring Hill, Tennessee, which is about 30 minutes south of Nashville. And so biggest thing for us is over the last couple of years, as we've talked about, we've gotten away from single family and are doing exclusively multifamily. And so we've got a vote tomorrow night on a single family project. It's a big vote. It's a 247 lot subdivision. And so we're really excited about that. But that's kind of the biggest thing on the horizon here is if we can get some positive movement there, get back to building houses, get back to kind of that side of the business. It's great. So that's super exciting. It's a win. It's been 2.5 years in the making to get to this point. It seems like these projects take longer and longer. So it's a big win that we're finally here. So hopefully next call I'll have some positive news to report, but I'll have news to report regardless.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations. Is that a piece of land that you guys have that you own or just something you have under contract and you're trying to take it through entitlements first?
Yeah, we're taking it through entitlements first, and it's a little bit of a unique piece. It's actually 3 different pieces of land, all owned by different family members. So we've got 3 separate pieces under contract as a package deal, contingent on getting approvals.
That's cool. Awesome.
Well, to jump into our topic for today, I think it's something that Chase and I are both pretty well versed in at this point as we're starting to look for it, is looking outside of primary markets into secondary, tertiary, even beyond that markets, and kind of the things that we look for, the things that we get excited about when we hear about, and just kind of what, from a real estate perspective, is exciting to us as we move outside kind of the markets we're used to. So start us off, Chase, just kind of what's the initial stuff that you concentrate on.
Yeah, I think some of the stuff, and I guess the first thing I'll start to say is, or I'll start with, is that a lot of these markets that we're considering or looking at, I feel like it's really a longer lens view of it. And so like there's literally markets that I've been kind of following for several years now. And so it's like I'm keeping an eye on it. And then as we're looking at the markets and I think it might be something interesting to us, then maybe we start taking next steps from there. But for me, a big thing I'm looking for is, at least here locally, is one, job growth or future job growth. So I'm really paying attention to markets outside. We're in Little Rock, Arkansas, so we're in central Arkansas, but I'm looking at surrounding cities or even other parts of the state where I see a lot of new potential employment, like either manufacturing facilities or employers coming into those, maybe the smaller markets that are going to bring a lot of jobs and or need for housing. So I think those employers coming into those areas is something that we're looking a lot at. And then another thing I'm paying pretty close attention to, and I think this is because, and you guys don't have this option or this problem, I know, but Little Rock struggles with not very good schools. So the school district in Little Rock and the public schools here, it's a really big issue. And so they're not very good. We're fortunate that like our son goes to private school, which is an amazing private school. But we're looking at markets that are outside of Little Rock, so close enough where people commute here for work. But they have things like much better public schools, and then like safety, so crime is lower, and then just an all around better place to live. So like the market that we're going through, that we've identified, and we're under contract with land and going through this entitlement process, it's very close. And so you can be in Little Rock in 20, 25 minutes, maybe a little bit longer with traffic. But they've got really good schools. It's known for being very safe and having low crime. And the city's pushing really hard to bring amenities for the community, like parks and volleyball facilities and more restaurants and retail and stuff like that. So cities that are looking to expand, but also like kind of a good place to live for people that are going to commute.
No, I love that. I love your last point. Because that's really like the most attractive thing. And Chase and I have talked about it a little bit before, but my saying is kind of like, I want to build where people want us to build. It's tough over the last couple of years. It's become a very uphill battle to kind of do what we do. And it seems, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to us from our seat because, we're trying to, obviously our goal, everybody's goal in business is to make a profit. But our goal is to provide housing. That's one of the, core things that people need. And so when we look at these tertiary markets, kind of one of the first things that we look at is, hey, do they want us here? And a lot of times the answer is yes. You started to get how in bigger cities that, it's tougher. They're making you jump through hoops. They've got higher fees, higher taxes, higher everything. And in some of these smaller towns, they're excited. They want you there. They're willing to help out to make a project work, whether it's infrastructure or, just little things. They're just easy to deal with. And so that's kind of one of the first things that we look for. And then it's really fresh on our mind because they passed a sewer moratorium in our local city. But one of the other things that we look for is sewer availability. And so it's hit or miss in some of these small communities. We went to a community 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's not good for the community largely, but they had a big factory that had 3,000 or 4,000 jobs in it 20 years ago, and that factory had shut down. And so since then, the city's recovered and they're back on the upswing, but they had a really high sewer capacity because of that population that they had at the time. And so they've got a ton of availability. And so it's one of the things that we look for because our goal when we go into these smaller places, which we're working on, is we don't want to build just one project. Ideally it's going to be 2 or 3, ideally we establish a reputation and stay there for a little while. And so if they've got some sewer runway and sewer capacity, that allows us a pretty good path forward. And so that's one of the things we look for. And then the other thing is, and it depends just availability of good buildable land, and that's, it's a common sense thing, but some of these cities are ringed by hills and hillsides and, it makes it difficult. Anything's possible. But when you're trying to build, especially an affordable product, it's very difficult to do that if your land is not flat, if the dirt's not good. And so those are kind of the things that we tend to start out with.
Yeah, the sewer thing is interesting. You guys probably wouldn't necessarily run into this where you're at, but Arkansas can get very, very rural very quickly. And we've got a house on Greers Ferry Lake, which is about an hour and a half north of here. And man, I would love to build some rental housing up there, either build a rental or apartments, because there's a huge need. Like I constantly see people posting looking for rentals. There's not one rental available within 30 or 40 miles up there. But they don't have sewer systems. Like it doesn't exist. And so that is not even an option there. And so it's funny is we've looked at developing a couple small parcel of land, but it's problematic because you literally have to come up with either, I know you guys are looking at this on a larger scale, but like smaller package systems or septic. And the idea of like building rental properties on septic tanks just seems like a nightmare to me. And so it's like, it's a huge problem for looking at places like that. And they're in need of rental housing, so they'd love to have it. But they literally don't have the same city services that a lot of larger cities have. And then again, like you said, the flip side we run into, although City of Little Rock swears to me that they're pro-development and they want to see development. It sure doesn't feel like it sometimes. I mean, in these bigger cities like Little Rock, it really feels like they're it's almost like a cops and robbers type thing. It's like we're the bad guys trying to develop the city or revitalize the city, and they're trying to do everything they can to like stop that or make it harder. And so it makes us not necessarily want to do business here. But again, I think it's those in between cities, the cities that have the available, services there as far as city sewer, water, electric, all that kind of stuff, and then want the development are very, very enticing to us, or really looking to grow the cities, because there's some cities that have all that stuff, but they really like being a small community, and there's some that are really looking to grow. You guys are you guys also looking for new areas to do multifamily development in, or right now are you just focused on the single family?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of that's one of the reasons we want to hit a lot of these, tertiary markets. Is a lot of it honestly has been awareness from our employees. We see where they live, and we have a lot of employees who make decent money, good money, and they're driving 45 minutes or an hour to work every day. And so, we're seeing that pricing and seeing people who make a good wage get driven farther and farther out. And so that's, our vision ultimately would be, we have a spot in the town where you can rent for us that's clean, that's good, that's affordable, that allows you to save money. And then somewhere else in town, you can buy a house from us. That would be the end goal. But I think there's a huge opportunity for some of that. You call it workforce housing, you call it what you like, but a good, clean, affordable product that's well managed, but it's not fancy. It's probably not huge, but it does the job. It does not break the bank, because even where we are, 30 minutes outside of Nashville, a 2-bedroom rental is $1,800 a month, and that's a ton. I mean, pre-COVID, that was a wild number. A number we wouldn't have even thought of, and so everything has become so inflated. People who, it's teachers, it's public servants, police officers, firemen, servers at restaurants, all those people that we need every day, they're getting forced farther and farther out. And so they need a place to live. And so, yeah, we think multi and single family, there's demand in these areas for sure. But what are you guys planning for? What do you see in that?
I think it's a great way to look at it. And I will say that that's something that I personally have experienced. So again, before I moved here, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that's something that I noticed early on, where it was not uncommon for like the jobs that I had to be in some of these, either the nicer communities or the urban core communities, but that was never where I lived. And so I always lived outside of that. And it was worse there because the traffic was so much worse than where you're at or where I'm at. But it was definitely not uncommon there, and I would say normal, for people to go where they could afford, and they would just have to commute in for work. And for me personally, that's something I did. There was times where, I would have loved to buy a house in the same community that I grew up in where my parents lived, but I couldn't afford one, especially when I was young. And so I ended up buying a house 30 minutes away, where I could afford a much nicer house and a much nicer, for me, which was a nice area. And so I think that's something that's very common. So that's something I personally experienced. And that's something we're looking at. I'm a big believer in what I saw in the Bay Area where I grew up, is I think over the last 30 years, you had this explosion of all this development that moved farther and farther away from those core communities where most people worked, which I think it was great for growth and housing and development and all that. I still like Little Rock being that kind of urban core, because I do think what happened over that towards the tail end of that 30-year cycle, people got tired of that commute, especially as traffic got worse. So they actually wanted to move back closer to where they worked. But that's later on as they can afford it, right? So I see the need for both. But again, for us, we're looking at some of these other areas that are, 25, 30 minutes outside of Little Rock, where people can commute in. But it's both. There's a need. So when I look at available rentals in Little Rock, there's a lot of available rentals right now. It's taken longer to fill vacancies within Little Rock because there's a lot of units available. But some of these other communities are nicer to live. There's barely anything available. So we're looking at what's available to rent. And then again, we're also not building to sell anything right now, not because we don't want to, but because stuff's not really selling. But I say that everything that we've built and it hasn't sold has been in Little Rock. And so as we do start to look for places to build, to sell again, we'll be looking at some of these communities that they have less homes being built. So I suspect that they're going to sell better. One thing I look at, and we've got a mutual friend who's out of a home builder out of Billings, Montana. I went and visited him, and he's rocking and rolling, building and selling houses still, and it almost to where it was surprising to me. But when I got there and I was looking at like what's new construction available on the market today, and it's a similar size community to where I'm at, but they had like a fraction of the inventory. So there's like a fourth of the inventory, new construction inventory on the market right now. And so it's very clear. It's like, well, no wonder why it's selling. There's less, you're not competing with 20 other new houses. There's only a handful of them. And so for us, as we start to look, one, at the rentals, we're looking at the neighborhoods and seeing, are there a ton, is it saturated or is there not a lot available? What do we think the need for the community is? We always want to have the nicer rentals, but we don't want to go too nice and price ourselves out of that market. And then again, as we start to look back or start looking into more build to sale type stuff, we're really going to be paying close attention to what kind of density of available product is there on the market, because we don't want to go into a market that's already oversaturated and then just build more and really struggle to sell.
No, that's a good point. And you mentioned manufacturing earlier. Obviously, I think job growth is something you're always going to want to look for in one of these markets. And, everybody's got their opinions on current administration, and not to get political at all, but there's a big push for USA factories. And so you see a lot of factories locating in these areas that we're talking about. They're not locating in a downtown area. They're locating an hour and a half outside, and they're bringing a lot of good paying jobs. And so that's where some of these opportunities lie. And at a city we visited recently, they had a business actually that had announced it was either a downsizing or, they were going to have to lay some people off. And I believe it was after the big, beautiful bill passed, that totally got quashed and everybody still had a job. And so you've seen, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of factories come online. And a lot of older factories kind of get revitalized as that made in the USA has more of an impact and means more during this administration. So it's something to look for. I know Arkansas, I see, because Chase shares them all, has a lot of corporate and factory relocations. Same with Tennessee. And so it's a big impact. And a lot of times what we've heard when we've talked to these cities is that, within the first 2-3 questions that these companies ask when they move is, hey, where are people going to live? And so you're solving a problem for these small areas as much as the jobs solve a problem for you. And so it's really a symbiotic relationship. They need good quality places to live in order to continue to get these factories or corporate relocations or whatever it is. And so it's a really good mix that you have to have. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because I expect that trend to continue for at least the next several years.
Yeah, one of the areas that we're strongly, and so I've been following it pretty closely for several years now. It's just we haven't pulled it. I think it was a little bit early, but we're really considering doing something up there that's either like a multifamily or build to rent development, and then potentially housing for sale. Is up in Northeast Arkansas, where there's been just a massive push to bring manufacturing in there. And it's funny because they were way ahead of this new bill. But it was several years ago, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, that U.S. Standard Steel came in and built like $1 billion steel manufacturing facility up there. And since then, you've seen, it's been cool to watch just all these other manufacturers that need steel pop up within real close proximity, because that allows them, it's easy access for them to get the raw steel that they need to manufacture, like rebar manufacturers, pipe manufacturers, and auto manufacturers, all that kind of stuff are starting to pop up there. But we go up into that community, it's interesting because the community itself is still very depressed, parts of it. And there's there's outlying communities away from there where like some people are building some houses to sell. There's huge shortage of rental property, like especially nice rental properties up there. It's wild. But a problem they're having in the community is they get these young guys like straight out of college will get a job at a steel mill making, it's like 100,000 plus a year with their like incentives and everything, but they had nowhere to rent, nothing to buy. And so it's like some of these guys are buying houses like in Tennessee and commuting an hour and a half every day to work, or they're like, a bunch of them are renting a house together and camping out during the week and commuting back. And so it's just an interesting thing to find some of these areas, especially places like in Arkansas that have historically been very rural and not a lot of need for housing there. And then really because of this big push for manufacturers coming back into the U.S., they're bringing all these jobs. And so now they are kind of scrambling. And those communities are very pro, like, it's like anything we need to do for you guys to come up here and build anything, like we'll do what we can. And so it's been very interesting, but it's still early on. So it'll be interesting to see how long it takes for some bigger players to get in there and start ramping up, or if it's just going to be smaller people like ourselves that go in there and do just a little bit at a time. So it's interesting.
No, I think those are all great points. And I mean, my kind of closing encouragement to people would be, I see people post on LinkedIn or something like that, the 6 hottest markets in Tennessee or the country, and those are the hottest markets. I mean, statistics bear it out, but there is opportunity in 10 other markets. And so I think, I know a lot of people who are having a lot of success in towns you've never heard of that will never pop up on any list ever anywhere for a city that you should go build in or pursue real estate development in. And so I think especially over the last couple of years, it's been super hot and sexy to develop in Austin or, Nashville or, all these places that have been booming. But I know people who have done just as well in a town that you've never heard of with a population of 3,000 people as you have in a major city. And so I think the encouragement is, drive around. That's the first step to me. A lot of these cities I go to, it's like, man, this is nice. They've got a connotation. Maybe you've heard about them. But when you're there, it's a feel, and so drive around, visit some of these places, see what you think might be an opportunity. But I would just encourage you to explore. You don't have to move states like Chase did, although it's a great option. But the first thing I would do is take your local area wherever you are, drive an hour radius around it, and see what you find. You may find some really interesting opportunity pretty much in your backyard. But what would you say, Chase? What's your takeaway?
I think that's a big thing. And I think also just try to and you touched on it earlier, try to look at it through the lens of the people that are going to be your end customer. Right. And so I'm very fortunate that I live and work and go to the gym on this tiny little bubble, West Little Rock, and I don't have to commute because I live very close to where I work. But try to put yourself in the shoes of the employees that would be working for you, or potential coworkers, or the people that just, if your demographic that you're targeting for housing are going to be like young professionals, where are they going to want to live that they can still commute in a reasonable amount of time, and go try to look at some of those areas. Or another thing would be if they have young kids that are in schools, where are the schools where they're going to want their kids to be in school? If they have the opportunity to if they don't have the opportunity to put them in private school, they got to go to public school. Which public schools do they want them in? And so just try to look at it through your customer's lens and then target those areas. Don't just target the areas where it's, for you, Nashville was the big sexy one to develop in the last couple of years. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of those people that developed in Nashville the last couple of years might be in a little bit of trouble right now. And so it's just because that's where it's the hot place to go doesn't mean that's always where you should be.
No, that's right. And just one last closing argument or comment. In a lot of these small towns, you don't get the high highs, but you also don't get the low lows. They're pretty steady. And so, you're not going to get 100% appreciation over 5 years, but you're also not going to have a big contraction. And so there's a lot to be said for that, especially if you're starting out. And so just something to think about. But as always, we appreciate everybody listening. If you thought this episode or any of them have been informative, throw us a like, give us a 5-star rating. We always appreciate hearing from people. Leave a comment. If you know of a success story in a tertiary market, we'd love to hear it. But please reach out if there's anything we can do to help everybody. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.